Nina and her colleagues were shocked, their eyes fastened to a computer screen in the middle of the office bullpen. The footage showed a group of police officers assembled near a bridge in what looked like a medieval village, cordoning off photographers and curious onlookers. An incident in Verona had just made its way into the news cycle in New York. A young Italian couple, recently married, had jumped off a bridge together, hand in hand, after opening their boxes on their wedding night and discovering that the bride possessed a devastatingly short string. The group survived the joint suicide attempt, while his wife of 3 days did not. Nina winced when she realized that the tragic act, set in far Verona, would undoubtedly spark an onslaught of tasteless Shakespeare puns in the tabloids. "It's so horrible," said one of the reporters. "But you know what's really crazy?" asked a fact-checker. The guy knew he wouldn't succeed in killing himself. They looked at their strings, so they knew that hers was short and his was long. Even if he did something completely dangerous, he knew he wasn't going to die. Well, maybe he knew he wouldn't die, but obviously he was pretty messed up about it. He still risked paralyzing himself by jumping off a fucking bridge. Oh yeah, of course, but it's weird to think about. I don't know. To me, it's just more proof that nobody should look, said the reporter, clearly seeing that their strings drove them both insane. They weren't insane, Nina thought. They were heartbroken. But she didn't expect her coworkers to understand. They couldn't look past the dramatic spectacle to see the ordinary, everyday anguish that lay just underneath it. Their staff was small, dwindling every year in tandem with the magazine's budget, and as far as she knew, Nina was the only member of the office with such an intimate connection to a known short stringer. Her colleagues had been timid at first, understandably wary of breaching any work-life boundaries, but the team had always been close enough to speak freely about breakups and weddings, pregnancies and deaths, and eventually they opened up about the strings. A third of the staff hadn't looked in their boxes. The rest seemed fairly content with their findings. After learning about Mara, several co-workers even offered to cover Nina's desk should she ever need some time off. But for Nina, there was no such thing. Surrounded by the news all day, Nina could never escape the strings. She found herself begging Deborah to assign her to some other story, any other story, but it seemed as if there weren't any. The field of presidential candidates were taking shape and global temperatures were rising, but nothing captivated the readers the way the strings could. There was hardly an hour in the day where Nina wasn't thinking about them, wondering if she would ever know the truth. Mara often described Nina as a lovable control freak, always needing to store the Tupperware containers with their proper lids, never buying a new skirt unless she already owned a matching top. Part of what Nina loved about being an editor were the rules, the clear and comprehensive laws of grammar and linguistics, and she loved wielding the power of the red pen to enact them. Before her promotion, when she was still trying to prove herself as a reporter, she reveled in seeking out the facts, burying herself in piles of research, charged with the hunt for the truth. But everything about the strings unearthed an even deeper desire for knowledge, for control. The lack of answers. Where did the strings come from? Why now? Do they actually control the future, or simply possess the knowledge of it? Kept Nina from sleeping through the night. Everything was too murky, too gray. She needed things in black and white. And Nina was forced to helplessly watch Mara suffer, because nothing could be done. Any semblance of control had been ripped from them both. Nina felt powerless, like she was reliving one of the worst days of her life. Back in senior year of high school, she had spent an hour that morning with the school's guidance counselor, seeking advice on coming out to her friends, unaware that a catty classmate had been eavesdropping through the door. And by the time that Nina had left the office, she didn't need to worry about finding the right moment to share. The truth was already out. Even now, as an adult, Nina could still see the gym's locker room, the curious glances, the subtle nods, the embarrassed whispers. For someone who refused to let even one sentence be printed in the school newspaper without her explicit editorial sign-off, she had entered a new circle of hell. Nina's meticulous planning, her weeks of internal debate, everything was scrapped in an instant. All her power, all her control had been stolen away. She had only intended to tell a handful of friends, but word quickly slipped across multiple grades. Of course, 2 days later, her news had been eclipsed when half the soccer team was suspended for smoking pot behind the field, and hardly anyone could remember the gossip from before, except for Nina. She would always remember. More than a decade later, living in the apartment she rented with Mara, Nina could still feel the anger and humiliation, could still recall vowing to protect herself from any other agony, from ever losing control again. Amy and Mara often asked her to be less controlling, to loosen up, to let it go. But Nina couldn't let go, not when she lived in a world of betrayal and heartache, of mysterious boxes and painfully short strings. If Nina let go, then whatever it was that she was trying to protect, her younger self, her future with Mara, would be left unarmed and vulnerable, out of her control. The boxes were now a part of her life. Nina couldn't change that, but she was determined to regain a sense of power and clarity. And so, in the wee hours when she couldn't sleep, or when Mara was away from their apartment, Nina found herself scouring the internet for answers. What had started as a simple Google search, where did the boxes come from, quickly unspooled after Nina clicked over to Reddit and landed in the middle of a popular new subreddit, r/strings. She instantly realized there were hundreds of ongoing discussions, all attempting to decipher the mystery of the boxes. Normally, Nina was too private a person, too self-disciplined, to enjoy the public abandon of most social media, but she surprised herself with how easily she could slip into the conversations and suddenly lose 2 hours online. Nina landed on one photographed by Gordon Coop 531957 of a box illuminated under UV light, fingerprints glowing on the outer casting. Proof, the photo was captioned. Posted by user/Maddie 1 hour ago. Proof of what? That you're an idiot? Posted by user The Watcher 1 hour ago. Definitely extraterrestrial. It's why the prints are invisible to the naked eye. Posted by user NJBro44 2 hours ago. Dude, those are probably your own fingers. Another user, OffDagrid774, posted a picture of his box being kept inside a microwave, urging everyone to do the same. Don't let the NSA listen to you. Posted by user ANH 1 day ago. You're right, the boxes are def-bugged. The Gov spying not just on Americans, but the whole world. How else would they have your name and address? Keep it out of your house. Posted by user Fran_M 1 day ago. OffDagrid774, do you think there's a camera inside too? The religious contingent occupied a smaller corner online, though equally vocal. A Bible verse shared by redvelvet_mama had recently gone viral as an alleged testament to the box's divine providence. Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Matthew 7. Nina didn't believe anything she read. It was all just conjecture, but it was comforting to know that there were thousands of people, millions even, who were just as unnerved as she was, and just as interested in finding the truth, if such a thing even existed. On Sunday evening, when Mara was at her support group, Nina thought about the man in Verona and what her co-worker said. It was an unsettling thought that someone was essentially immune to dying unless they reached the end of their string. Especially strange for those, like Nina, with long ones. Sitting in bed, Nina pulled out her laptop and searched "long string plus death" to see if anything might come up. The query led her to a new site, Don't Try This at Home, with its own ongoing discussion. When she reached the forum, it was filled with the accounts of seemingly reckless long stringers pushing the limits of their strings. I have a long string, and a few days ago I OD'd on painkillers, but my roommate found me, and here I am. Thanks, string. My girlfriend and I had been wanting to play with asphyxiation for a while, and we both have long strings, so figured now is the time. 10 out of 10, would recommend, semicolon, close parentheses. Happy 22 to me, got a long one, smiley face, looking for some special K to celebrate. Nina had to stop reading. How could so many people be willing to experiment with their lives? But hearing their stories only made the mystery of the boxes that much more disturbing. The power of the strings even more potent. It was like the strings knew your responses all along, as if they were somehow able to account for any daredevil tendencies when determining your final measurement. They could somehow see which drugs and games and jumps would be fatal, and which would merely end up as morbid one-liners posted online for whoever happened to be browsing. Nina felt sick. She closed her laptop and curled up her legs under the sheets, hoping Mara would come home soon.